She looked me right in the eyes, kissed me goodbye, and said she was heading to yoga class. Again. I paused, taking a sip of my whiskey. But I already knew where her real poses were happening. The day I discovered my wife's affair, it wasn't dramatic. No lipstick on the collar, no suspicious text messages popping up while she was in the shower. Just a feeling. After 12 years of marriage, you develop a sixth sense about the person sleeping next to you, the slight changes in routine, the newfound attention to appearance before exercise class, the way her eyes wouldn't quite meet mine when she talked about her day, and the yoga mat that somehow never seemed to get unrolled. My name is Michael. I'm 38, a software engineer with a decent job, a mortgage on a nice house in the Seattle suburbs, and until 6 months ago, I thought I had a happy marriage. This is the story of how I uncovered my wife's betrayal and the unexpected way it all played out. Let me back up a bit. Rebecca and I met in college. She was studying business. I was neck-deep in computer science. We weren't the most obvious couple, but somehow it worked. She was outgoing, ambitious, the life of every party. I was more, well, let's say I preferred smaller gatherings and deep conversations. But we balanced each other. At least that's what I thought. After graduation, we both landed jobs in Seattle. Marriage followed 2 years later. We bought our house, settled into careers, and started talking about kids. But something always came up. Her promotion. My startup idea. The timing wasn't right, and before we knew it, a decade had passed. I noticed the change about 8 months ago. Rebecca suddenly announced she was getting back in shape and signed up for intensive yoga classes. 3 times a week, then 4, then 5. She'd come home looking refreshed, not sweaty, not tired, just glowing. "How was yoga?" I'd ask. "Great. Really challenging today," she'd reply without elaborating. At first, I didn't think much of it. We were both approaching 40, and maybe this was her way of reclaiming something. But then came the new underwear, the subtle changes in her wardrobe, the mysterious weekend work retreats that she was oddly vague about. And then there was the distance between us. Not just physical, though, that was certainly there, but emotional. Conversations became functional, movie nights dwindled, sex became rare, then practically non-existent. "I'm just tired from work and yoga," she'd say, turning away from me in bed. I tried talking to her about it. "Is everything okay with us?" I asked one night while we were doing dishes, one of the few activities we still did together. "Of course," she said, not looking up from the plate she was drying. "Why wouldn't it be? You seem distant lately." She finally looked at me then, with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'm just focused on taking care of myself right now. That's healthy, right?" I nodded, but something in my stomach twisted uncomfortably. It was my best friend Dave who finally said what I'd been afraid to acknowledge. "Dude," he said over beers one night, "I don't want to be that guy, but are you sure she's actually going to yoga?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Of course, the thought had crossed my mind, but hearing someone else say it made it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. "She wouldn't," I said automatically, but even I could hear the lack of conviction in my voice. Dave just raised an eyebrow and took another sip of his beer. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, listening to Rebecca's even breathing beside me, feeling like there was an ocean between us even though we were inches apart. Was it possible? Was my wife having an affair? The next day, I did something I never thought I'd do. Something that went against everything I believed about trust and privacy in a relationship. I checked her location on our shared phone plan. According to her calendar, she was at yoga from 6 o'clock to 7:30 p.m. But at 6:45, the little blue dot that represented my wife wasn't at Serene Spirit Yoga Studio. It was at the Westlake Hotel downtown. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. Maybe there was an explanation, a special yoga event, a work meeting she forgot to mention. Anything but what my gut was telling me. I decided I needed to know for sure. The following Thursday, when Rebecca announced she was heading to yoga, I waited 20 minutes, then drove downtown to the Westlake Hotel. I felt sick with every mile, hoping I'd prove myself wrong, that I was just being paranoid. The hotel lobby was elegant, with soft lighting and plush furniture. I sat in a corner, half hidden by a large potted plant, feeling like I'd stepped into someone else's life. A bad movie. This couldn't be happening to me, to us. And then I saw her. Rebecca walked through the lobby with confident strides, not in yoga clothes, but in a dress I'd never seen before. Her hair was down, styled the way she used to wear it when we were dating. She was heading toward the elevators, checking her phone and smiling at something on the screen. My heart hammered in my chest. She hadn't seen me. Should I confront her now? Follow her? I was paralyzed with indecision. Then a man approached her. Tall, distinguished looking, maybe late 40s. He leaned in and kissed her cheek with the casual intimacy of someone who had done it many times before. She laughed at something he said, and they walked to the elevator together, his hand resting on the small of her back. I sat there unable to move as the elevator doors closed behind them. The drive home was a blur. I felt numb, disconnected from reality. This couldn't be happening. Not to me, not to us. We had plans, dreams, a future together. When Rebecca came home that night, I was sitting in the dark living room, a glass of untouched whiskey in my hand. "Michael, why are you sitting in the dark?" she asked, flipping on the light switch. She was back in her yoga clothes, hair pulled up in a messy bun, looking exactly like someone who'd just finished an intense workout. The performance was flawless. I almost admired her commitment to the lie. "How was yoga?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Good," she said, dropping her unused yoga mat by the door. "Though I think I pulled something in my shoulder. Jason had us hold plank position forever." Jason, the yoga instructor who didn't exist. The classes she never attended. I could have confronted her then. Part of me wanted to explode, to demand the truth, to ask her how long she'd been lying to my face. But another part, a colder, more calculating part I hadn't known existed within me, decided to wait. Because suddenly I wanted more than just confirmation. I wanted evidence. I wanted to understand the full extent of her betrayal before deciding what to do next. "Want me to massage your shoulder?" I offered, hating myself for the charade. She looked surprised by the offer, then guilty. "No, it's fine. I'm just going to take a hot shower and go to bed early." "Okay," I said, raising my glass in a mock toast. "Sleep well." Over the next 2 weeks, I became someone I didn't recognize. Someone methodical, observant, patient. I documented each yoga class that was actually a hotel rendezvous. I noted times, dates, locations. I even managed to get a photo of them together in the hotel lobby when they didn't notice me. I learned his name was Richard Caldwell. A quick LinkedIn search revealed he was a senior partner at the consulting firm Rebecca's company often worked with. He was married with 3 children. There were pictures of them on his profile, a beautiful wife, teenagers with his smile, a perfect family portrait. Just like the one Rebecca and I had taken last Christmas, the one still sitting on our mantle like a cruel joke. I discovered their affair had been going on for at least 5 months, possibly longer. The receipts I found buried in her email for jewelry I'd never seen her wear suggested at least 7 months. Each new piece of evidence was a fresh wound, but also, strangely, a relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. The distance I'd felt wasn't in my head. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy. Asking about her day, smiling at her stories, kissing her goodbye in the morning. Each moment of pretense felt like swallowing broken glass. But beneath my pain, another emotion was growing. Not just anger, though there was plenty of that. No, what I felt was a cold determination. Rebecca had made a fool of me for months. She'd looked me in the eye and lied without hesitation. She'd thrown away 12 years of marriage for hotel room assignations with a man who had his own family at home. I wanted her to feel a fraction of the humiliation I was experiencing. I wanted her to face consequences, not just from me, but from everyone who mattered to her, especially her father. Rebecca's relationship with her father, Robert, was complex, but incredibly important to her. He was a traditional, no-nonsense man who'd raised her with strict values after her mother died when Rebecca was just 14. His approval meant everything to her, even in her 30s. He'd walked her down the aisle at our wedding, tears in his usually stoic eyes. and told me he was entrusting his greatest treasure to my care. Robert had always liked me, always treated me like the son he never had. We went fishing together, watched sports, talked business and politics. He'd been disappointed when Rebecca and I didn't have children, but he never pressured us directly. He just occasionally mentioned how he wasn't getting any younger and would love to be a grandfather before he kicked the bucket. Our annual family dinner at their house was coming up, a tradition that had started when Rebecca and I first got serious. It had evolved over the years from an intimidating meet the parents ordeal to a warm family gathering I genuinely looked forward to. This year, it would be different. As the dinner approached, I refined my plan. It wasn't enough to simply tell Robert about the affair. Words could be denied, explained away. Rebecca was convincing she'd certainly had enough practice lying to me. No, I needed irrefutable evidence, something no one could dismiss or minimize. And so I made one final trip to the Westlake Hotel, this time with a better camera than my phone. I sat in the lobby for 3 hours, waiting, watching the elevator, until finally they emerged. Rebecca and Richard, hand in hand, looking relaxed and intimate in a way that made my stomach turn. I followed at a distance as they walked to the hotel restaurant, taking photos of them sharing a bottle of wine, laughing, his hand on hers across the table. And then the kiss, not a friendly peck, but a lover's kiss before they parted ways. The photos were clear, unmistakable. There would be no denying what they showed. The night before the dinner, I prepared the final element of my plan. I created a simple slideshow, loading it onto a USB drive. Nothing fancy, no dramatic music or captions. Just the evidence, stark and undeniable. That night, lying next to Rebecca for what I knew would be one of the last times, I felt strangely calm. Tomorrow, everything would change. Our life together would implode. But the relief of ending this charade almost outweighed the grief of losing the marriage I thought I had. Robert and Sandra's house looked the same as always, a well-kept colonial in a nice neighborhood, with Sandra's prize roses lining the walkway. Robert had married Sandra 5 years after Rebecca's mother died, and while their relationship had been rocky at first, Sandra had become a true mother figure to Rebecca over the years. "Michael! Rebecca! Come in! Come in!" Sandra called from the door, wiping her hands on her apron. The smell of her famous pot roast filled the air, and for a moment, I felt a pang of regret for what I was about to do to this family dinner. Rebecca squeezed my hand as we walked up the steps, misinterpreting my tension for the usual mild stress these family gatherings sometimes caused. "It'll be fine," she whispered. "Dad's in a good mood. I talked to him earlier." If she only knew. Inside, Robert embraced us both, his handshake with me firm and warm as always. "Good to see you, son," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Sandra's outdone herself with dinner this year." "It smells amazing," I replied, my voice unnaturally tight. Rebecca looked at me curiously, but was quickly pulled away by Sandra to help with something in the kitchen. "Whiskey?" Robert offered, gesturing to his study. "Please," I said. "I'd need it." In his wood-paneled study, surrounded by books and hunting trophies, Robert poured us each 2 fingers of his good scotch. "So, how's work?" he asked, settling into his leather chair. I took a sip, welcoming the burn. "It's good. Busy. And how are you two doing? Rebecca seems different lately, more energetic." I stared into my glass. "That's actually something I wanted to talk to you about, Robert." He raised an eyebrow, waiting. "Not now," I added quickly. "After dinner. There's something I need to show everyone." Concern crossed his face. "Is everything all right, Michael?" I couldn't meet his eyes. "No, sir, it's not. Dinner was torture." Sandra chatted happily about neighborhood gossip. Robert discussed the upcoming election. Rebecca talked about work, carefully editing out any mention of Richard Caldwell, I noticed. I pushed food around my plate, barely tasting anything, responding on autopilot when questions came my way. "Michael brought something to show us after dinner," Robert announced as Sandra served dessert. Rebecca looked at me surprised. "You did? What is it?" I forced a smile. "It's a surprise." After dessert, Robert suggested we move to the living room, where their large TV was. My heart pounded as I pulled the USB drive from my pocket. "I put together some photos," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I thought we could look at them together. Oh, how nice, Sandra exclaimed. From your trip to Vancouver last month? Rebecca and I hadn't been to Vancouver. That was another lie she'd told them. Another yoga retreat weekend that she'd actually spent with Richard. Not exactly, I said, connecting the USB to their smart TV. Rebecca sat on the couch, looking relaxed, unsuspecting. Robert and Sandra settled in next to her, expectant smiles on their faces. I hit play. The first image appeared on the screen. Rebecca entering the Westlake Hotel, checking her appearance in a compact mirror. "What's this?" she asked, her voice light but with an undercurrent of tension. I didn't answer. The slideshow continued. Rebecca greeting Richard in the lobby, his hand on her back, the two of them laughing over wine, holding hands across the table. The kiss. The room went silent. So silent I could hear the antique clock ticking on the mantel. "Michael," Rebecca started, her face draining of color. "I can explain." "Who is that man?" Robert interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. I finally spoke. "His name is Richard Caldwell. He's a married father of 3, and for at least the past 7 months, he's been sleeping with your daughter while she told me she was at yoga class." "That's not," Rebecca began, but stopped when her father stood up. Robert's face had transformed. I'd never seen him look so devastated, so utterly disappointed. He stared at the frozen image on the screen, his daughter in another man's arms, then turned to her, his expression hardening into something terrible. "Is this true?" he asked. Rebecca was crying now, mascara tracking down her cheeks. "Dad, please, it's complicated." "Is this true?" he repeated, each word like a hammer blow. She looked down and in a whisper said, "Yes." Sandra gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Robert looked at Rebecca for a long moment, his face a mask of disgust and disappointment. Then he straightened up, squaring his shoulders. "You are no longer my daughter," he said, the words falling into the room like stones. Rebecca made a sound, half gasp, half sob. "Dad, no, please." "The daughter I raised would never do this," he continued, his voice shaking with emotion. "The daughter I raised had honor, integrity, not this." He gestured to the screen. "Not lies and sneaking around and destroying her marriage for what? Hotel room assignations with a married man?" "Robert," Sandra began, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "I have nothing more to say to her," he said, turning to me. "Michael, I am so sorry. You deserve better than this. You will always be welcome in our home, but she—" He looked at Rebecca with such profound disappointment that even I flinched. "She needs to leave, now." Rebecca turned to me, tears streaming down her face. "You planned this," she whispered. "You wanted to humiliate me." "No," I replied calmly. "I wanted the truth to come out, all of it. No more lies." She stood up shaking. "I'll get my things," she said to no one in particular, and disappeared upstairs to what had been her childhood bedroom, where we'd planned to spend the night. The aftermath was both exactly what I'd expected and nothing like I'd imagined. Rebecca moved out the next day. I learned later that she'd gone to Richard's, expecting him to leave his wife for her. Instead, faced with exposure and the potential loss of both his family and his career, he'd panicked. He denied the seriousness of their relationship, claimed it was just physical, and begged his wife for another chance. Rebecca was left with nothing, no husband, no lover, no father. She tried calling me repeatedly in those first weeks, but I had nothing to say to her. Eventually, the calls stopped. The divorce was finalized 6 months later, clean, straightforward, with no children to consider and a prenup that protected both our assets. On paper, it was an easy dissolution of 12 years together. The reality was messier. There were nights I questioned my actions, wondering if I'd gone too far. If I could have confronted her privately, tried to work things out, given our marriage another chance. But each time those doubts crept in, I remembered her face in those photos, carefree, happy, in love with someone else while I sat at home confused and alone, believing her lies. Robert kept his word. He cut Rebecca out of his life completely. No birthday calls, no holiday invitations. Sandra sometimes met Rebecca secretly for coffee, unable to fully sever ties with the girl she'd helped raise. But these meetings were rare and hidden from Robert. As for me, I was surprised when Robert continued to include me in family events. "You're still family," he insisted, though it was strange at first being there without Rebecca. But over time, it became our new normal. Robert and I still went fishing. Sandra still sent me cookies at Christmas. Life went on. 6 months after the divorce, I received a letter from Rebecca. Not an email or a text, an actual handwritten letter, which showed how well she still knew me. I'd always been old-fashioned that way. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. "Michael," she wrote, "I've started therapy, real therapy, not just the counseling the HR department offers. I'm finally facing some hard truths about myself and why I did what I did. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve that, and I know it. I'm writing because I need to own what I did to you. The affair wasn't about you or any failing in our marriage. It was about my own insecurities, my fear of aging, my need for validation from someone new. It was selfish and cruel, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. You deserved better. You deserved honesty, even if that honesty was me telling you I was unhappy or confused. You deserved the chance to fight for our marriage, or at least to end it with dignity. I'm sorry for taking that from you. I'm sorry for the lies. I'm sorry for everything. I hope someday you find someone worthy of your trust. Rebecca." I read the letter 3 times, then carefully folded it and put it back in the envelope. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. That was 2 years ago. I'd like to say I've fully recovered, that I've moved on completely, but that would be its own kind of lie. Trust doesn't come easily to me anymore. I've dated a bit, but I find myself looking for signs, analyzing texts for hidden meanings, questioning innocent schedule changes. But I'm getting better. Therapy has helped me too. I'm learning to balance caution with openness, to protect myself without building walls so high no one can scale them. As for Rebecca, I heard from mutual friends that she moved to Chicago for a fresh start. She's not on social media anymore, at least not under her old accounts. Robert still refuses to speak about her, though Sandra lets slip once that Rebecca calls her every Sunday, trying to rebuild that relationship at least. Richard and his wife are still together, according to LinkedIn. I sometimes wonder if they truly reconciled or if they're just keeping up appearances. Either way, it's not my concern. The house sold last year. I live in a downtown apartment now, closer to work, with a view of the water. It's peaceful here. Different. Mine. I still have moments when the anger rises up, threatens to consume me. Days when I question whether my revenge was worth it, whether I should have found another way. But then I remember the look in Rebecca's eyes when she realized I knew everything. Not just regret that she'd been caught, but true understanding of what she'd thrown away. And the strange thing is, in that moment, I felt sorry for her. Because I walked away from that dinner with my integrity intact. I told the truth, ugly as it was. I faced the consequences head on. Rebecca lost everything that night: her marriage, her father, her lover, and most importantly, her carefully constructed self-image. She had to finally see herself clearly, and that was perhaps the cruelest punishment of all. I sometimes think about alternate versions of our story. What if I'd confronted her the first night I saw them together? What if I'd never checked her location at all? What if I'd forgiven her, tried to understand, fought for our marriage? But that's not what happened. And in the end, maybe it's better this way. The truth, however painful, set us both free. Free to become different people. Better people, I hope. So if you're listening to this and you're in the middle of your own story of betrayal, I don't have easy answers for you. I can't tell you whether to fight or walk away, to forgive or to hold firm. Those are choices only you can make. What I can tell you is this: the worst part isn't the betrayal itself. It's the not knowing, the doubting your own instincts, The gaslighting, whether from your partner or from yourself. Trust that feeling in your gut. You know more than you think you do. And remember that whatever happens, however your story ends, you'll survive it. Different, maybe. Scarred, certainly. But still whole. Still you. That's what I'm still learning. Anyway, one day at a time. Nino, if this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to confront a difficult truth in your relationship? How did you handle it? And if you enjoyed this narrative, please consider subscribing to the channel for more stories about life's complicated moments and the ways we find our way through them.